Okay, so let's dive right into this. We're going to explore a story that's about 2,500 years old, and it's all about one single profound idea. An idea so powerful, but also so easy to misunderstand, that the Buddha himself had to step in and set the record straight. It's really a story about the nature of our own minds, and how a simple misconception can be the very root of all our suffering.
So our story starts with this monk named Sati. He was a fisherman's son, and he came to what he thought was this huge insight. He basically came to believe that our consciousness, our awareness, is a single, continuous thing, kind of like a soul that just travels from one life to the next. And, if we're being honest, it's an idea that kind of makes intuitive sense to a lot of us, right? But what he saw as this big breakthrough, the other monks, they saw it as a real danger.
Yeah, the other monks were pretty alarmed. They knew the Buddha's teachings inside and out, and they immediately saw Sati's idea for what it was. Not some deep insight, but a harmful misconception. They tried to talk to him, to reason with him, but Sati just wouldn't budge. So since he was digging in his heels, the monks knew they had to take it to the next level. They went directly to the Buddha himself.
Let's just be super clear about what Sati was saying here. This wasn't just some vague idea about reincarnation. He was saying that the very core of you, that voice in your head, the part that's listening to me right now, is some kind of solid, permanent thing that just keeps going and going. It's an idea that feels true, doesn't it? But it was a total misreading of the Buddha's core message.
So when the Buddha finally confronts Sati, his response is, well, it's swift and it is sharp. He calls him a feudal man, which is pretty harsh, and then he just cuts right to the heart of the mistake. He says, haven't I said in many ways that consciousness is dependently originated? And there it is, the core distinction. Consciousness isn't a thing that exists on its own. It's a process that happens. It can't just appear from nowhere. It only arises when the right conditions are present.
And to make this point totally unforgettable, the Buddha didn't launch into some complicated philosophical lecture. Nope. He used a simple, brilliant analogy that anyone could understand, both back then and right now. He explained that consciousness is like a fire. Just think about that for a second. Is fire a thing, or is it an event? You can't really put fire in a box and keep it there, right? Fire is the process of burning. It's a verb, not a noun. And the very same thing, the Buddha argued, is true for our awareness.
And then he took the analogy even further. Think about it. We almost never just say fire. We identify it by whatever it's burning. We talk about a log fire, or a grass fire, or even a rubbish fire. The fire itself is inseparable from its fuel. We literally name it after what it's consumed.
And this just perfectly illustrates his point about the mind. Just like a fire is named for its fuel, consciousness gets its name from the sense door it arises from. So when you see something, that's eye consciousness. When you hear a sound, that's ear consciousness. When a thought pops into your head, that's mind consciousness, you see? It's not one single self that's looking out of different windows. It's a series of totally separate events, each one arising and then passing away with its cause. This whole powerful idea has a name: dependent origination. It's this core teaching that nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, exists all by itself. Everything, from a thought that lasts a split second to a star that lasts for billions of years, only arises because of a specific set of conditions. You take away the conditions and the thing itself just ceases to be. It's a pretty radical way of seeing reality as this completely interconnected, fluid, and ever-changing process.
But, okay, this wasn't just some abstract philosophy lesson. The Buddha then used this exact principle of dependent origination to map out, step by step, how our own minds create our own suffering. He laid it all out like a chain reaction, showing precisely how one link leads to the next.
So let's trace this chain for a second. It all starts with ignorance, basically not knowing that this whole process is even happening. That ignorance then conditions our consciousness to arise. This consciousness then makes contact with the world through our senses, which always leads to a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Now here is the most critical link in the whole chain. That feeling, if we're not paying attention, automatically triggers craving, And that craving, that wanting more of the good stuff or less of the bad stuff, that's the fuel that leads directly to grasping and existence, and ultimately to what the Buddha calls this entire mass of suffering.
But here's the most important part of this entire teaching, the real good news. This chain reaction, it's not a life sentence. It's a diagnosis. And because we can see exactly how the chain is put together, link by link, we can also see exactly where we need to break it.
So if this chain is the diagnosis, then what's the cure? Well, the teaching gives us a super clear path from being, a puppet of our own reactions to finding real freedom. So how do we actually do it?
The text shows this really clear split, right? On one hand, you have the untrained person. They experience a feeling, let's say it's a pleasant taste, and they immediately think, ooh, I like that. They cling to it, they want more. That's craving. But the trained person, they experience that exact same pleasant feeling, but they just note it without grasping. They don't try to push it away, but they don't cling to it either. And it's in that tiny little gap, that space between a feeling and our reaction to it, that's where all the freedom is. By cutting that one single link between feeling and craving, the whole chain reaction just collapses, like a row of dominoes tipping over. When craving ceases, well, grasping has nothing to grab onto. When grasping ceases, the fuel for future suffering is just gone. The entire structure that was built moment by moment, it just unravels.
Okay, so after laying out this incredibly detailed map of reality, the Buddha does something pretty remarkable. He gives a warning. He actually cautions the monks against getting attached to the very teaching he just gave them.
He asks them, even if you have a view that's as pure and bright as this one, what happens if you cling to it, if you start to treasure it and treat it as your personal possession? He asks, would you really be understanding my famous simile about the teaching being like a raft? A raft is absolutely essential for crossing a river, right? But once you get to the other side, you don't strap it to your back and carry it around with you. You leave it behind. And that is the ultimate lesson here. Even the most profound, most correct understanding is just a tool. The goal isn't to collect a bunch of correct views or to win a philosophical argument. The goal is to use those views to navigate the river of your own experience and actually get to the shore of freedom. The teaching is the raft, it's not the destination.
And so that leaves us with a question that's just as real and relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. In your own life, what ideas, what beliefs, what identities are you clinging to? What are you treating as the final destination when maybe it's just a raft that has served its purpose, and maybe it's time to let it go so you can walk freely on the other shore?